All right, but because this is the first session of your day, I'm going to make everyone do something really strange and super weird. So if you could all stand up on your feet for me, please.
Is that us too?
Yes, you too. Maybe Tim accepted.
It was hard enough to get actually.
It was. You guys are excused. Come in. Can you put your right arm in the air? Can you turn around to the person next to you and high five them and say, "You're awesome for coming out to GEC." High fives. And then, can you put your left hand in the air and do it to the other person on the other side? All right, you are all amazing for coming out on a Wednesday morning at 9 in the morning. You can take your seats. Now we're all a little bit piped up. Come in, still come in. All right, so thank you so much for joining our session. Everyone's too friendly now. All right, we're still coming, front row, come on. I'd like to begin, of course, by acknowledging the lands on which we're gathering today and pay my respects to the elders past, present and emerging, and recognise the continued connection to land, waters and communities and strong and continued legacy of innovation right here in the state of Victoria. I'm Lauren Morey. I'm the Executive Director of Breakthrough Victoria, and it's my absolute pleasure today to be joined by 4 outstanding individuals to have a conversation on taking things from lab to market, really all in the space of breakthrough innovations. So I'd like to introduce them all to you because they are just wonderful individuals, but I'll do it in alphabetical order, and it's not to choose any particular favourites. And so first I'd like to introduce Jan Bingley. So Jan is a senior executive who's had a career in finance and venture capital, as well as in commercialisation. She's currently the Director of Business Commercialisation and Development at La Trobe University, and she's been on the investment committee for 2 Australian venture firms and has been on government committees that assess and award startup companies with matching commercialisation grants. Dan spent several years leading innovation and commercialisation at the CSIRO, and where she was responsible for the creation of many startups in a variety of sectors, raising funds and securing exits for those startups. So thanks. Welcome, Jan. Next, I'd like to introduce Tim McLennan. So Tim is the Executive Director of RMIT for Research Partnerships and Translation and is responsible for the development of key research partnerships across industry and government to facilitate research development and innovation translation and exchange to enable RMIT to deliver impact for its partners and society. He's passionate about uplifting innovation, technology and development, and is a highly collaborative team player, which is evidenced by his participation in preparation for this forum. And he's also committed to building the next generation of innovation and translation specialists right here in Australia. So welcome, Tim. Next, I'd love to introduce Kathy Nielsen. So Kathy is the Senior Director of Commercialisation at Monash Innovation, the tech transfer office of Monash. Kathy leads a team of commercialisation professionals and a vast pipeline of opportunities across physical sciences, life sciences, medtech and other areas. Monash Innovation manages the process from IP disclosure to deal, from spin-outs, licenses and assignments, and average 30 to 40 deals per year. Previously, Kathy was a senior investment manager at Queensland Investment Corporation, where they managed 4 VC funds, both here and in Australia and in the USA. We're very lucky to have Kathy right here in Victoria now. So welcome, Kathy. And lucky last but not least, I'd love to introduce you to Werner van der Murray. I hope I didn't do that right, did I? Sorry, I'll practice a bit more. Werner leads the Innovation Enterprise Portfolio at Swinburne, a university where technology and innovation, entrepreneurship are at the heart of everything that they do. Before Swinburne, Werner headed up the Research Commercialisation, Australia's national science agency, and before that, he had an extensive career in industry where he commercialised technologies all over the world. And likewise, we're very lucky to have you also here in Victoria. So welcome, Werner. So the format for today is we've got a few topics that we're going to unpack as a panel, and then we will try and create the space to have Q&A from the audience. So if you're going through and you're thinking about questions you might like to ask the esteemed panel, by all means jot them down and we'll have a runner come around if we manage to keep it on time. But to kick us off, I'm going to ask a rather spicy question, because you may have seen a really big announcement yesterday from Minister Carroll right here in the state of Victoria about excellent partnerships with all of these respective institutions. And so Breakthrough Victoria is very proud to have a university innovation platform that really represents quite a unique opportunity for each of the universities and the institutions. But if you believe what you read in the papers, some people don't think that universities are well placed to commercialise their own research. And so I'd love to hear from the panel, what do the pre-seed funds mean for you and for your respective institutions, and more broadly, commercialisation? And I'll open it up to anyone.
Go, Jen.
Go on, Jen.
All right, I'm happy to kick it off.
They're right, because universities don't actually do the commercialisation piece. The role of the universities and people like us is to find the partners and the entrepreneurs to come into the university and work alongside our researchers to get research outcomes out in the market. So, but our role is making that magic happen by bringing in the right people. The Breakthrough Victoria Fund is a real incredible gift to us, and it's going to make a big difference, because what it is, it's targeted money available at the very early stage post-idea. So you've got your idea and you've validated your idea. You have a willing team that wants to give it a go, so an entrepreneurial researcher, someone like that. But it's too early to expect industry or other investors to come in and provide funds for that opportunity. So the Breakthrough Victoria money will provide those early stage funds and work with the team and work with that idea to get it up to the point where we can then attract industry and teams to come in and actually take on that project, that initiative, and really drive that commercialisation. So that's kind of how I see it.
Excellent. Thank you.
I think that's well put. At the university, we're responsible for the deal flow rather than the exit side of things, but it's a great source. We get about 120 invention disclosures a year. Maybe 30 to 40 of those end up in licenses, including the spin-out, 8 to 10 spin-outs. This is going to greatly enhance that because we've always been scratching around for money. I'm so delighted that the government has given funds that we can invest in our own technologies and kickstart that. So that's the big thing for me. Put around that teams, education, entrepreneurship, which we're already doing. We have spent about $2 million a year investing in our own technologies anyway. It's been a bit ad hoc. We can now formalise it, systemise it, scale it. So having a belief that the universities can start that process off is really motivating for us. So.
Yeah, I mean, everything I said. Essentially. Except I think as to whether or not universities are good at commercialization depends a lot on the definition of commercialization that you're using. So to some extent, people use the word commercialization to really mean technology transfer. And, coming from industry, as my background, I find that quite strange. It turns out, if you look at the statistics, universities in Australia are actually really good, as in best practice world-class at technology transfer. Usually those metrics are expressed per dollar of research invested. And so what that tells you is if you want to grow the technology transfer ecosystem, the simplest way to do that is not to worry about the efficiency of universities, but to just invest more in research, which is something I think Australia can do a lot of. As to commercialization, that's an entirely different ballgame because technology transfer is just a tiny little bit of the puzzle. In terms of the Breakthrough Victoria University Innovation Platform Fund, from my perspective, the more we mature as an ecosystem, the more we realize that there's no silver bullet, right? It actually takes a whole bunch of things to be successful at entrepreneurship, especially research commercialization. And so, you can put up a venture fund that'll solve a problem. You can invest in developing founders that will solve another problem, but really you need all of it. You need world-class research all the way through to world-class commercialization expertise. The Breakthrough Victoria University Innovation Platform Fund, though, it occupies that niche that Jan was talking about that is actually, severely underfunded, and the universities are investing ourselves alongside Breakthrough Victoria, who made it possible to actually plug that really important gap, and hopefully that debottlenecks the whole value chain to some extent with all of the other support that's around in the ecosystem.
Wow, this is a tough gig coming after you three. Adding to that, I think a couple of the important things are, this is like a 5 to 7 year runway. So it's not like we've got to worry about year on year and are we going to have enough resources to actually see some of these things run through. So we can put in some strategic planning and wrap that around, and which means that from our people perspective, growing human capital, which for me is always a really important thing around innovation, because you need the people who are able to understand the pathways to the market and the engagement process. Having that long-term perspective enables us as an ecosystem, and this, we were talking about this before, this doesn't happen in isolation. You actually need to build the ecosystem. And having come from Queensland, and a couple of other areas, you've seen different ecosystems evolve. What I think the government has done here is really, really smart. It's not a lot of money when you look at the impact that'll come out of it, but it's the partnership component, I think, is what I'm going to value a lot out of this, because we will have that independent perspective on some of those issues, and we will have this ecosystem where we start to get a much higher level playing field than I think we're going to see in other areas. So that's why I think this is really important. Great question to come back in 5 or 7 years and say, well, what was it like?
Love it. Well, building on your point, Tim, so what if I said you don't build a business, you build people, then people build the businesses? So what role are each of your institutions playing in building the builders of businesses, and who needs to also come on that journey to make sure that they are built?
That is a fantastic question, because the biggest thing I think everybody here will understand, and I see my colleagues from QUT who's built the founder programs there, you need people, innovation. Jeff Garrett, ex-CEO of CSIRO, he always said innovation walks on 2 feet. So unless we have that capability, we're not going to be able to get those partnerships, those translations, or those people are going to stay up at night trying to work out how these initiatives get through to market, while the rest of us sleep at this stage, because we're getting a bit long in the tooth to do that. So I think that's going to be really critical, and as us collectively having a human capital pool, and it's going to wash across Australia, New Zealand and other parts of the world as well, but also I think we'll attract expertise and capability in here. The one thing about that is I think we need to be flexible, because what we're going to see, we're going to have to build in the early part, we're going to have to coach people, build them through into that process. This longer term run that's come through in this partnership and the ability to work collectively in the ecosystem, I think will enable us to do that.
Yeah, I think that's exactly right. The flip side of it is that some of the biggest constraints we see in terms of getting some of our technologies to market are really the people in the ecosystem that can do that at every stage of the journey, whether it's a commercial co-founder, whether it's just a business analyst that can actually build a cash flow model, and things like that. Universities, though, are in the business of creating talent. And all of our universities are investing heavily in creating those entrepreneurs of the future. And I think there's an opportunity as well for industry to lean in now that there is a bit more funding in the ecosystem to help us do that. And so it's really the beginning of a new era, I think, today.
Look, I'll just add again, I think we're blessed here with the Breakthrough Victoria opportunity, because I know Breakthrough Victoria also acknowledged that one of the significant spillover benefits from this opportunity is to drive cultural change. And so certainly I know at La Trobe, we can really now identify and work with those of our researchers that have really got that entrepreneurial bent and really want to give it a go, and we can partner them with students. So I think there's a real opportunity in here for our students as well to get involved in some of these early ideas. So again, I think it's creating that real impetus to help support and nurture and sort of pull out those researchers that really want to give this a go. So I think that's a real value add from this initiative.
Yeah, look, I think it's really incumbent on universities to help build that entrepreneurial ecosystem. I see some of my colleagues down the back there really driving that entrepreneurial education. We also do it one-on-one, working with people, but this ability to scale it and drive educational programs through, create that culture, really important. And I don't know, what it was like when you did your degree, but when I did my degree in maths and chemistry, that you could go and work for a big company, or you could be a teacher, or you could go and work in something that had nothing to do with your degree. But now this entrepreneurial pathway is a really big pathway. We're building businesses in Australia. It's a long felt dream of mine. I'm really excited to see this come to fruition.
Lovely. And so speaking of colleagues that are in the room, I can see a few other friendly investor faces in there. So the University Innovation Platform is going to build some of the strongest pipeline of investable companies for the state. But I think we all, as you've heard, we can't do this by ourselves. So love to hear from the panel how you're thinking about how do we unlock further investment to ensure that all of these breakthrough ideas can reach the scale of their true potential.
Well, always more money, more of it. We've had a limited pool, and Australian companies have often had to go internationally to access capital, so having more of it here. Bit of deal type flexibility. We've had some great venture capital funds surrounding the university and medical research institute sort of environment, but they might only do one deal type. We're actually very flexible. We try and listen to what investors want and say, what's your model? What's your preferences? Here's what we can do. Equity, no equity, royalty, bit of both, you know. So building in flexibility into how you deal with this, because I'm finding that, you know, investors from America will want to do a deal quite different from investors in Australia. So maybe that's something we could consider, you know.
Yeah, look, it's really important that we do. And I mean, I think we need to make sure that our pipeline, our early pipeline, gets some visibility in the sector so people can see some of the emerging opportunities and trends coming through. I think that will be important. You're right, Lauren, we can't do it alone. So this is about taking early stage ideas and transforming them and turning them into something that industry can engage with, that venture capital can look at providing capital to. So the responsibility for us is to make sure that we keep our eye on the next stage, so we ensure that we don't, you know, encumber IP or encumber the terms or do anything like that that would not make them attractive for that next step. And I would agree with Kath, flexibility in terms and on both sides is always something that I think we're all looking for, and that's, again, when we can see opportunities really grow and prosper.
So I'll be a bit contentious and say it's not just about the quantity of funding. I think it's really about the quality of the deal flow. So in my experience, there's a lot of venture capital available for good propositions and very little available for not so good propositions. So in my view, the biggest investment to be made is really in creating more investable propositions in the first place. And I think if we do that, then the venture capital follows, success follows, and the whole ecosystem bootstraps itself. There's some really good statistics around intellectual property commercialization that a very, very small percentage of that ever makes it to market. And so a lot of the work that we do in our tech transfer offices, in our commercialization teams, is really on things that actually don't go there. Now, if we could pick the 1 or 2 in 100 and only work on those, then that would be a lot easier, but unfortunately you can't, right? And so there's a huge overhead in actually administrating an intellectual property pipeline, of which not much actually ends up being super successful. So, you know, I'm thinking even before the idea stage, Jan, like, you know, how do we actually come up with these ideas? Where do we apply our discretionary research dollars, our capabilities to actually make sure that we come up with commercializable IP in the first place, rather than try and just work with what we're handed from the academic world?
Thanks, Werner. I think that last piece is really important across the board. It's how, now that we've got that runway, how do we go from a piece of tech to a venture? And a venture is going to be something that's going to have a pathway. There's a couple of key points here. One of the things, and I'm going to go back to human capital, one of the things we do at RMIT is really focus on that mentoring program, the mentoring with industry. And to your point about there's good money and not good money, I think it's more than the money. The money's one bit, but it's where our ability to engage with the next level funders, because we build investables. That's what we've got to do, not just commercialise tech because we don't. It'll actually have to go the next step of investment for those larger scale processes. But how do we actually build those, connect in with the mentoring process, use those industry partners and investment partners to grow that ecosystem, which then enables us after a period of time, and it's not going to happen overnight, build this process that's maybe not self-sustaining, but it's actually got that momentum, it's got some wheel ruts it's going to be able to operate in. So I think it's part of that ecosystem we've talked about.
All right, thank you. That's it from me. So I'm going to open it up to the Q&A for the floor. If you want to have a question, please raise your hand and we'll run around to this microphone so we can all hear you. Oh, Phil. Olga, can I borrow you?
Thank you. Hey everyone, good to see you all. So Phil Moore from Main Sequence Ventures. I'm keen to know, warts and all, how do venture capitalists break things for you guys? What mistakes do we make that makes it harder for you to do your job at the university?
Good question.
Hey, Phil.
Chancel's like, give me the mic.
Thanks, Phil, for that free hit.
No sugarcoating, please. Bring it on. Let's go.
Talk direct to researchers without involving us would be one. Sometimes that's a good thing, but I guess somewhere along the track, I think we can add value if we're in those conversations early between you and our researchers. Unrealistic expectations around the stage of the research would be another one. And I think, again, that's where people like us and our teams can potentially help with that. And in fact, where we can help and where I have seen it happen is together we can actually work out where the gaps are in the technology, and so where some focused funding can go into to address that gap before we go right down into deal terms, if that makes sense, Phil. So, work together at that early stage to identify because the university, does have funds to be able to plug gaps. If we can see an interest from someone like yourself that's interested in taking it further but needs, another experiment done or data set or whatever, but work together with us on that. That they would be some of the things that I can think of.
A quick follow-up on that one. Do you find that, is there also a culture change happening or not in the venture community about collaborating better at that early stage, or is venture still in general expecting the beautiful, polished, ready to invest in deal?
So I'm old, as you know, Phil, been around for a long time in this sector. I think it's changed a lot. And I think that's partly due to Main Sequence Ventures. I think IP Group's also been part of that. Brandon Capital's another one. We've really evolved over time, haven't we, in terms of people coming together and recognising that you're better off to work with us early and to bring our officers into the mix early. I think that's changing a lot. And I've got to tell you, and I think Brandon, Breakthrough Victoria will be one of those as well, prepared to do those hard yards at the beginning. So I'm really encouraged by that. And I would urge other venture capital firms to be, if you want to understand the pipeline and the opportunities that comes out of university research commercialisation, I would urge you to think about that sort of early engagement.
Yeah, I just pick up on what you've said there. Bill, I've had some great engagement with Main Sequence. I've seen that evolution in the ecosystem. We've seen some of the early stage funding coming through with people like Artesian, because we're all part of the one community. The point is we can't get to an investable stage unless we understand your investable or the next phase of investment. And it may well be they mightn't be ready for a more mature one, but there could be partnerships in between that help bridge that gap. So I think we need, to your point much earlier, we're very flexible. We just want to all get to I think we're all on the same boat. We just need to probably be a bit clear about our roles.
Yeah, I just wanted to reinforce what Jan said, that feedback about what we need to do before you would consider it investable is really important. We take into account, we have what we call the Monash Research Impact Fund, but that's exactly directed to doing some of those experiments or the key go, no-go things. But the other thing I'd like from the investor community, like we get we're used to working with the Brandon Bio Capitals and IPGs of the world, early stage, so they're not frightened of pre-seed or coming in early. Sometimes they want to come in almost too early before we're ready, and we've got to scurry around. But then sometimes the due diligence can stretch out long and long and long, and it's sort of like, let us go, we can go and talk to other people, we can come back and talk to you later. So not stretching that out would be useful.
Yeah, the only thing I would add is I think there's a bit of a misalignment in business models. So, one of my great pleasures at Swinburne is to chair the Swinburne Ventures Limited Fund, which has been around for a couple of decades, making early stage investments. And whenever I put my Swinburne Ventures hat on, suddenly I'm looking for the top 1% of things that are genuine breakthroughs, that's got a great team and a proven market and some traction and things like that. Because that's the business model of a venture fund. When I put my university hat back on, I have to look at all the other 99% of things and try and help them progress along the pathway to commercialization. And the only other thing I would say is that venture capital plays an outsized role in commercialization, punches way above its weight. But there's a whole commercialization ecosystem beyond that. And the bit that I'm particularly interested in is industry's role. We often talk about the supply side of innovation and try and fix that. But really, it's the demand side of innovation that's the key to unlocking success at scale. And by that, I mean industry being able to adopt some of these things and incorporate it into business. So it doesn't always have to be a startup. And I think we really need to think about that industry adoptive capacity as the next frontier.
Lovely.
Hi, Todd Olney from the Cleantech Group. I agree 100% with what you say. We look at the same thing of a supply side and demand side. And the role in the university is that supply side. The risk capital is a bridge, but the commercialization, it's engaging with the corporates. So from a university point of view, you guys have the laboratories, the facilities, the hard tech. How do you engage with corporates to figure out what their unmet needs are, engage them in your earlier stage development of the technologies? Do you running sponsored programs, having them, and the hardest thing for startups, they can get the capital, but they don't have that industrial expertise. So they can make a great thing, but they can't make 1,000 great things. And so that's where that industrial expertise helps on the scale up, and then also back to that earlier stage of setting the priorities for the R&D. So how do you guys have different approaches at university? Because some are material science, some are agriculture. How do you guys do those?
Yeah, could I have a go at that? And I'll use an actual example, maybe to illustrate the point, which I think you would find at all universities. There are dedicated functions that do that. But at our university, we have the Factory of the Future, and it's really centered around automation and IoT and Industry 4, those kinds of things. That factory has had about 600 SMEs come through the door, learn about the technology, about the capability, how to adopt it. They get taken through a program, and many of them then go on to adopt technology and become technology companies as opposed to just SMEs. And there are lots of programs around like that. I'd say it's actually something that Australian universities does quite well. Now, how do we scale that? That's a whole different question, right? It's not through the University Innovation Platform. It's not through traditional venture capital. Research in Australia is not fully funded. So, if industry wants to access research in Australia, they would have to pay for it, at least to some extent. There's some really great grants around. I see Thomas is here, and he's about to launch another nice scheme at the federal level. So there are mechanisms in place, but I think there are some serious constraints in industry engagement as well.
We've seen some models in Europe where some of the venture funds are working with their LPs. What are some unmet needs? And then the venture fund acts as that bridge to go back to the university, look for some of those early stage fellows programs and help them get to meet those very specific corporate needs. I think one of the examples I've heard here is, I think, Great Wrap from La Trobe. It came out of using some potato skins to create a cling wrap. That's then gone to the market and then engaged in the US with the Amazon Accelerator. To me, that's a great example of some of those types of activities.
Absolutely.
I just think quite briefly on that. As Werner was saying, the university ecosystem here is quite diverse. And there's some really big players like RMIT's 100,000 staff and students. I mean, it's one of the largest in the world. There's lots of different mechanisms by which we try and engage with industry. There's the advisory committees, there's hubs, there's functional areas, there's all sorts of things. It is still a challenge because in Australia we only have one or two really large sectors that are actually primary here, one of those being in the resource sector. If you're trying to get into some of the other supply chains, that's part of it, because we're not necessarily always going to be able to translate into the major corporates, because they will want to see their supply chain taking the commercialisation risk. They'll take the corporate risk, but not the commercialisation risk. Universities and research institutions manage the research risk. So getting that triangle of opportunities together and knowing who's the next party to hand it off to as they scale up, that's a really important thing we'd like to have a lot more conversation around.
Can I just add in probably quite a different approach, because there's no one way of engaging with industry. So we try and organise our opportunities into portfolios, and we meet with investors and big industry regularly, might be quarterly, whatever suits, and go through snapshot on our portfolio, and then that's that first engagement. We also think internationally and try and travel to conferences and engage that way in partnering. But it's really important. I think those ones where we have regular quarterly meetings, pipeline updates is a fantastic way to engage and welcome any investors who want to do that at Monash.
And just quickly from me, Werner's right, we've all got variations of the Factory of the Future, which I think is a great model. La Trobe's about to launch our Digital Innovation Hub through support, again, from the Victorian Government, to which we're very grateful. That's sponsored by Cisco and Optus, and it's very much about an open door for industry to walk in, bring us their problems, bring us their challenges, and we would then combine those with entrepreneur students, with our researchers, with other companies that are on site on our campus. So again, I think those models work well. You give them a reason to come along and a reason for them to bring their challenges and opportunities to you, and then hopefully magic happens and you combine a team around them to address those problems, and away you go. So, and all of us have pretty similar initiatives such as that. But it's not easy. It is about wearing shoe leather out and getting out and about and doing lots of talking and trying to organise our portfolios in a way that makes sense to industries and investors. So, yeah, good question.
Amazing. I will take one more question from the audience. So, yep, it's in the microphone.
No?
Yes.
Yeah. Thank you very much. To me, I think this is one of the most important sessions in this whole conference, so I'm really happy to be here. I mean, from academic perspective and from industrial perspective, I think we've been always focusing more on the TRL, the technology readiness level of any invention and innovation. But to me, again, there is a gap in the literature relevant to the investment readiness level and market readiness level. We don't normally see a lot where people elaborate on that. So from your collective experience, have you came across like a common factor where most of the successful ventures comes out successfully, basically? This is the first question. The second question, and thank you, we've been always, when it comes to spin-out and spin-offs that coming out universities and institutions, we've never came across any experience, at least from my humble experience, where there is a specific fund for those. And as you know, I mean, invention is just the first part of it. Industrial scale and practical cost is the real deal. But we don't normally see specific funds for such for spin-out and spin-offs. Thank you.
I think I caught that. It's always cheeky ticking in two questions. You're relying on us to remember. The second one around specialised funds for spin-outs coming out of universities, is that correct?
Yep.
So they do exist. They do exist. Some of the universities themselves have funds that they do use to do. I would call it probably seed, maybe even Series A funding for their own spin-outs. So Monash, for example, does it. I think Melbourne Uni does as well. So, some universities do have specific funds. I would argue that IP Group and Main Sequence and Brandon Capital are all venture capital funds. They're not just looking at university spin-outs, but it's certainly a key part of the pipeline that they're looking towards. So that would be my view on the second question.
I'll grab the first question around TRLs. Being an engineer by background, this is a passion topic, so stop me if I go too long. I think there's two problems. The one is that investment readiness levels are just not as well known because they weren't invented by NASA like TRL, so it doesn't have the coolness factor, but it's actually kind of more important. So there's a big job that we have to do as a community to raise that awareness around our academic colleagues and circles. And I think it starts, unfortunately, with that. I think awareness is still quite low. It's getting better, but it's definitely worth investing in. Just on TRLs, while I've got the mic, I actually think we misuse the system completely, right? So a TRL originally was invented when you know what you're going to build, right? So, the first TRLs were for building a spaceship, literally, right? That's what they were invented for. I think when we operate in a space where we've got academic freedom and research funding that is not targeted at a specific purpose, we often say things are at TRL 3, TRL 4, when really they're at TRL 0, right? Yeah, -1 is something that I've seen Jan use before, actually. And I think if we actually use them correctly, TRL 2, you have to know what the application is that you're pursuing, right? And I think if we use them correctly, actually we will solve a big problem on the IRL side, right? Because if you know what the application is, then it's much easier to assess problem solution fit, to go and look at the market and the business model and competitors and all that kind of stuff. So I actually think TRLs are, vastly overused, but used incorrectly. And if we fix that, we can actually help with the rest of the proposition as well.
That's lovely. I'm going to stop us there on those two questions because we do have to unfortunately wrap up this session. I'm so sorry. We will still be around all of the conference, so you can come find individuals if you wanted to go a bit deeper. Sorry, we really are out of time. But for the panel, I'm just going to take us to the future. Okay, so we're in 10 years in the future. We're in 2033. We're back on this panel. So we're back in Melbourne. We're back at the GEC in 2033. And we're going to reflect on the lessons of what we've learnt from the University Innovation Platform and how the success, or perhaps the inevitable failures of pre-seed investing, has impacted Australia and potentially changed the lives of Victorians. What does it look like? How are we feeling? And what are some of those success stories from today, announcing yesterday a very small start in the right direction, supporting some of these pre-seed ventures?
Okay. There'll be another one. We'll have a seed fund as well, and we will have obviously growth, a demonstrable growth in our portfolio of spin-outs, asset portfolio. It's going to be diverse. We're all going to have a different looking one, that's for sure. It's going to be, we're creating jobs and pathways, for people. Some people would have failed, but they would have learned a lot. They would have come back again. I think we will be optimising our transfer of technology to embrace different pathways. So, jobs as well. There'll be some exits, maybe a unicorn or two.
Sounds great.
In 10 years, it's a big call. A unicorn. Look, I know we're here in Victoria and talking about an amazing Victorian government initiative, but I'd love to see something national get up along these lines. I really do, and I applaud the Victorian government of taking a leadership role in it, but I'd love to see something national. Can't help it. I'm an Australian. I'd love to see all of Australia get the benefit of having this really important early-stage high-risk money to help nurture ideas. I'd like to see that we have an environment where those of our researchers that really want to give commercialisation a go know where to go to get the support. They're getting the mentoring support. they're getting the money, which is important, they're getting support from the university, they've got a great cohort of next stage investors that they can be talking to that are helping them shape their ideas. I mean, that's what I'd like to see Australia becoming, a real home for entrepreneurial researchers that, you know, has us punching above our weight. So that's kind of my dream.
Yeah, just building off on that, I'd like to add to it. Hopefully we'll see more CVCs, corporate venture capital groups, that are actually involved as well, which is part of that translation and picking up those early technologies. Not all about spin-outs, but will be around translation. Ideally, we might start to see more supply chains here, because this is where the knowledge workers will be and those innovation processes that they're starting to build. And to the point that was made much earlier, we will see ideally a workforce that's starting to become higher value because of the thought process as well, and we have a different risk approach to looking at how we look at technology and the innovation process. So we are much more dynamic than what we are now.
Lovely.
So for me, I think economic success would be nice, and that's not actually what I'm interested in. So at any given day, all of us are working with technologies that can, you know, cure incurable diseases, create entire new industries, you know, solve the climate crisis that we're facing, solve some of the societal issues that we are facing. So in 10 years, I'm hoping that the investments that we make through this scheme will actually make significant progress in addressing some of those things and create that real impact that I think is why we're all in this business in the first place. And hopefully that inspires then a next generation of these kinds of schemes that can scale that impact even further. And wouldn't that be nice?
That would be lovely. Thank you so much to the panel for joining me. If we could all give them a big round of applause. Thank you, Kathy. Thank you, Jan. Thank you, Werner. And thank you, Tim. Thank you so much for everyone who's attended this session. As I said, we'll be around the conference if you do want to ask any specific questions that you weren't able to do during the time today. But I think we're onto something really exciting, and we're all very enthusiastic about partnering, collaborating. So if you're working on something, if you want to come and be a co-investor, mentor, supporter for some of these great founding startups that we're going to be supporting, by all means, please reach out to Breakthrough Victoria or to one of these fantastic institutions and individuals. Thank you again, and enjoy the rest of your GEC. Thanks, Sue.
Hello? They are working. Hi, I think this one's working. Which one's working? Testing all the mics. Not that one. Testing. Can I get all the mics, please? Thank you. Good morning. Hello. If you're here for Building HEX, the unsung heroes of a healthy ecosystem, grab a seat. Sorry? We could go and get the people in from outside. Do we have a title slide for this session, please? Yep, thank you. Okay, we're about to start, so if you'd like to grab a seat, if you weren't here from the last session and you find yourself wanting to leave, see you later, have a great day. If you want to stick around, even better. If you're hanging around outside and want to spend some time with some fun people, come on in, and I assume we'll fill up during the session. Okay. For those of you who are here, and for anyone who does not yet know me, my name is Jeanette Chia. I am the CEO and co-founder of an education technology company called HEX. Now, who is actually from Australia in the room? Most people. That is amazing. Okay, they told me there was like 1,500 international delegates, so I had all this fear that I was going to be speaking too fast. But if you are from overseas or from not Melbourne, raise your hand. A few non-Melburnians, or from overseas generally. Okay. Well, it's lovely to meet you. Thank you so much for hanging out. I'm really sorry about the change in weather from, yesterday to today. That's just what we live with around here. But what HEX is we're an education technology company that is absolutely passionate about economically empowering the next generation. And we do this through innovation programs that are linked to academic credit, as well as high school credit, and we've successfully mapped all of our accreditation to University of Sydney. So that's a top 19 global university that puts a stamp across everything that we do, which is pretty exciting. And it's a way that we can kind of hack the system and allow students from all walks of life to access a really amazing tertiary education for a really much lower price and also in a much faster way of delivery. At HEX, we truly believe that innovation programs they are just an amazing equaliser. If you've never done innovation before and you've never done entrepreneurship before, it almost doesn't matter what your birth lottery was, because it is a chance for you to create your own economic future. And that's why I wake up in the morning, that's why I do this business. And our story started when I was still working for a gentleman that you're about to meet at ANZ Bank, one of Australia's biggest banks. And since 2017, my team and I have grown from just a couple of us doing it on the side of our desks to a team of 14 that has been successfully venture-backed and supported by Giant Leap, which is one of Australia's impact VCs, as well as scale investors. You'll meet another one of our investors on the panel today, as well as a whole host of amazing community people and events organisers and just good friends of the ecosystem like Nok Lei, who you'll meet. So the session today is a little bit for me to share what we do and who we are, but more importantly, it's to actually talk about the unsung heroes of the ecosystem. As the founder, you tend to have to do this a lot. You have to be like, oh yes, the photos and the headshots and the talky things and the panels, because if you don't do that, nobody knows about your business and nobody buys your product, and then you might as well just go home. But you can't do any of it without an incredible crew of people around you, and also people who might not realise what they're actually contributing to the ecosystem at the time. So in this room, who's an entrepreneur? Amazing, amazing. And who would say is kind of on the periphery, like an ecosystem hero that's unsung as well? You want to hear all about yourselves? Yeah, go on. Yeah. Hands straight up. Actually, Bronwyn is the epitome of an unsung hero over at LaunchVic. So I'm really excited to introduce you to my panel. If you will join me in welcoming Gordon, Samar and Nok to the stage. Now, I think we have 2 mics for you guys to share. Is that okay? Who wants to grab them? You can have them both. Okay. All right. Organise myself. Hi.
Testing.
Hello. Testing works. Okay, so first of all, I have the wonderful Gordon Rennie. Gordon leads digital transformations at ANZ Bank. He has been there for how long now?
A long time.
A long
15 years.
time. He's been building his career at the bank over many years. During that time, has mentored countless of people. He's been responsible for launching some incredible transformations within the banking space. Things that if you're an ANZ customer, you've probably used and haven't really thought about, right?
Yes.
Yes. And Gordon was the last corporate boss I worked for, and the one that allowed me to sneak off and build a startup. And so I'm very curious to hear, what on earth was he thinking? Right? So we'll get back to that in a minute. The wonderful Samar is here, Samar Michaela. She is the co-CEO of Scale Investors. Now, Scale Investors focuses on investing in women-led startups, and Samar is just an incredible supporter of the ecosystem. If you've been following Forbes recently, she and a few of the other people in the ecosystem have actually made it important for VCs to report on how many women they back in their entire portfolio, which I think, you can't... Yeah, thank you. Round of applause for that.
Thank you. Thanks, Jeanette.
Yeah, because you know what? That VCs always tell us to measure what matters, and if we don't get them to measure what matters, things won't change.
That's my job.
That's your job. And over to the side is the wonderful Nok Lei. And Nok is the director of a group you might not have heard of, but it's called Asian Hustle Network. And Nok is not just the director of this network here in Australia, which brings Asian entrepreneurs and community members together to, accelerate their communities and all sorts of things. But she's also a serial entrepreneur herself, having founded Dessert Parlour. So she makes amazing desserts and cakes. I think you've done like 6 different food e-commerce businesses.
Yeah, I've just started a lot of stuff and
yeah, you've
just in food and events. Yeah.
Food and events. Like she started something called What the Fur.
Go for yourself.
Go for yourself. Sorry. During the pandemic, which was soup and noodles delivered to your door, and also founded the Beer and Donut Festival in Coburg, which is pretty exciting. So Nok is one of those people that just connects humans together. And can you please give them all one more round of applause before I...
Thank you.
Okay. I think I do have a lovely little slide with their faces on it if you have that on the deck. And if you don't, it's totally fine. So I'm going to ask you first, Gordon, what was it like to have an annoying budding entrepreneur who couldn't sit still in your team? Did you as someone who, you're trying to get stuff done and you're paying a salary, how do you actually respond to someone who's like, yeah, can I just have leave to go and do this thing? Or can I go and study this other thing? Or can I take a break and take career leave? Let's talk about it.
Well, Gina, I'd say if you personally were annoying, I probably wouldn't be here today. So that's the furthest from the truth. Look, I think in all large organizations, diversity of teams are really important. And I would say people who have a passion for starting companies and doing different things tick that box of diversity. And any team's made better by people with different passions and different paths that they're on. And I thought it was great. Absolutely loved having somebody, the same as you love having somebody on the team who has a passion for recreating civil war battles or for doing whatever they do. You should harness people's passions, and your passion was Hex. So I thought it was fantastic. It was really good for the team. Everyone fed off it. There was a lot of energy from it. And I'd say annoying couldn't be further from the truth. It was great.
Oh, thank you. That's really kind. And I also appreciate that Gordon equates my hobby with Hex as being like a hobby at building Civil War battlefields. It's just like, that cute thing that you do on the side.
No, I was trying to show contrast. That was my intent.
That's totally fine. But can I ask you again, if you take a helicopter view, and this is for all three of you, if you kind of zoom out from your particular role in what you do every day, and you look at kind of the ecosystem as a whole, what roles do you think you actually play? Like, how would you just self-describe the role that you play?
I think you described it before. I think we're connectors. So I particularly love connecting people and really kind of delving deep into what is it that they're trying to solve and how can we help solve that problem. And I think I think the majority of people in this ecosystem just thrive off that. Whether you're in a corporate, whether you're hustling, whether you're in a role like mine, which is sort of structured, but not really. I think we just genuinely thrive on helping the broader ecosystem. And so it's kind of our job to be the helicopter and kind of match make almost. And, I was thinking about it this morning and I was like, you got to kiss a lot of frogs, right? But we don't want a prince. We want loads of princesses and all kinds of different people. And I think the more diversity we have, the better we are as an ecosystem.
When you say kiss frogs, do you mean like just have a lot of bad coffee meetings?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Can anyone relate?
Bad coffee and bad coffee meetings.
The-
We have
the-
lots of them.
The number of times I think I sat down with just someone who said they could help, and then you kind of realise that they want something from you. Anyway, it took me a while to figure out the frogs. Nock, you meet hundreds, thousands of people in your role. Can you just explain to the audience a little bit about what you do at Asian Hustle Network and how it fits into the rest of your life?
Yeah, so Asian Hustle Network actually started in San Francisco in 2019, just by two founders that were seeing there was something missing within the Asian American community there. So they started this Facebook group, and within a year grew to 100,000 members. And then I was part of that group at the very start, and I was like, oh, they're so supportive. Something about the Asian Americans, they're so supportive, such a close-knit community. And I was wishing and hoping that we could have something here in Australia, because I'm well embedded in the Asian community here, and I am sort of the middle person. People are always asking me if there's someone that I know that I can connect them to, or they're looking for mentors and advisors, and then I see the other end where a lot of business owners are wanting to give back, but they don't know how to or who to go to. So yeah, I just put my hand up and I said, if you guys are ever thinking about growing in Australia, I'd love to just help you out, because I just do events here all the time anyway. It's just what I love doing, love connecting people, and then that's how it started. So yeah, that's what we try to foster here, a more supportive, supportive community here.
How many people would you say have been to Australian Hustle Network, AHN, things like that, like a couple thousand?
We've probably about 1,000-ish. We have just smaller events that we host in Melbourne and Sydney so far.
Okay, so call out to anyone who is Asian or knows Asian Australians who'd like to join. Nock is your person to connect that ecosystem. And funnily enough, it wasn't something that I ever thought I would lean into as an individual. I think sometimes when you think about those parts of your life and community that you want to connect into, you don't always think about your culture or your sport or your music. And I think that that's something that I've learnt from all of you is building the surface space of connection is crucial, no matter where it's from. And I mean, the corporate sector has honestly held me in very good stead in terms of getting out there and building something. And Gordon, do you have any, I guess, advice for people who might be managing teams that do spot people in their teams that are entrepreneurial? Like, how do you harness that? Like, what kind of things could they do to bring that energy into the team?
Look, I actually don't think it's about entrepreneurship per se. I think any leader of a large team has a key part of their role to support their team, both at a team level, at an individual level, and supporting an individual is helping them be their best self, both inside and outside of work. If outside of work, or there's a crossover to inside of work, involves starting a startup, then you support that and you hope that makes them a better person at their work. If it involves starting a family, you support them in helping that. If it involves doing something else, you support them in doing that. Some of the time people will move on and leave. That's par for the course, but that happens more if you don't support someone than it does if you do. So what I would say is just be supportive, like you would for anybody who was doing anything in their life, because that's a kind of important role.
And do you see that this is a mindset that is common in the corporate sector, or do you think that you're a one in a million awesome manager type person?
Definitely,
I definitely think you're one in a million. But
Look, it's very big. The sector's big. I take my company; it's very big as well. There are many different parts of it. Some of the parts are very supportive of entrepreneurship. I've been lucky enough to work in, innovation teams and transformation teams, which is probably, I guess, more supportive of that. Other parts less so. So I think any organisation is very different. It's kind of hard to generalise, but bring it back to before. It's any leadership role should be supporting people, and if that involves their passions outside of work, then it's part of it too.
I love that. And I think even for those of us that are entrepreneurs, thinking about that as we lead our teams as well and grow our little baby teams from a couple to hopefully hundreds one day, thousands maybe. And Samar, you've also had an interesting evolution in your career to come into this ecosystem. So you were a corporate girly as well, if I may use the term. And you worked through JB Ware and all sorts of other very large corporate companies before joining Scale as an employee, and then now as a business owner of Scale, which is so exciting. Can you talk to us a little bit about how your mindset shifted through that journey and thinking about your role in the space?
Yeah, I think I think I was always just curious, and I think curiosity is something that continues to be a thread, especially in this ecosystem. But I mean, even in corporate as well, I think there are so many opportunities that I was given within my corporate career to explore that curiosity and, you know, start. I was that annoying person that would be like, let's do this leadership thing and let's like create this conference and let's bring all these, you know, different people together and draw on our different cultures and bring that diversity into the workplace. And, you know, I think people talk about this a lot about bringing your whole self. And I think I particularly enjoy working in this ecosystem because you genuinely, like, you're in it 24/7. So you kind of have to bring your whole self. And that just naturally works for me, which I love because I'm kind of an obsessive person. And so being intense, you know, really matches this kind of ecosystem. So I think curiosity is certainly one thing that that has probably been the constant thread.
It's funny, even when you mentioned before the coffee meetings, I remember the first time you and I actually met was at a little cafe called, I think it was the Butterfly...
Yeah.
Butterfly Lane or something? I don't know. It was in Tattersalls Lane, a very dark, dingy place. And I was trying to convince her to leave her corporate job to do a superannuation startup with me at the time because I was working at the bank thinking that superannuation was the most exciting thing in the world. But it's interesting to see...
Well, we actually have one in our portfolio now.
Right? And so I just think it's interesting to see like those initial chats, the people that continuously support you and help you at the right moment. You know, when I was ready to raise capital, you just went, let's go, and really supported me. So thank you so much.
You're most welcome.
And Nock, you know, your friendship, like the way that we met, do you want to tell the audience how we met and how that's continued?
Yeah, I remember this. So 2016 is when we met. We were the Melbourne ambassadors for this female entrepreneur community called Like-Minded Bitches Drink Wine. It's pretty big. Would you say it's over 100,000 members right now? Yeah. So there were 4 of us, and we just had to organise events for a year. It was like a year term. Organise events from scratch, like no budget at all, like with no budget, and just to bring people together. And I think that started our community building journey as well.
It was started actually by Jane Liu from Showpo, who's now the shark on Shark Tank, and Jen George, who's another e-commerce entrepreneur in Sydney. So you kind of see this theme of Nock jumping on community causes and putting it upon herself to organise groups together. And Nock, can you kind of make a comment about the fact that, like, I'm sitting here now with a microphone, feeling generally comfortable on a stage, but this wasn't always the case. Like, to actually get entrepreneurs from 0 to 1, sometimes they need these community stages and just the photograph with a microphone to make them look like they're credible. Yeah. Can you talk to the role that events play in the ecosystem and sort of the other things that people might not think of?
Well, definitely visibility, right? So it's a great platform to not only build confidence and like sort of learn those soft skills like public speaking, but your brand and your business and your personal brand is in front of now, you know, potential investors, collaborators, future employees, just general supporters. I think it's so important, so vital. People don't really even think about it, but I love doing these events so we give the opportunity to founders to be on stage.
Yeah, so if anyone's been thinking about organising events or thinks that they're just doing a whole bunch of stuff for nothing, it actually does play an important role in the fabric of the ecosystem. And Samaj, what would you say to someone who says to you, you're just doing all this free work, like you basically just get on the phone and connect people and get on LinkedIn and send connection emails, like how much of a percentage of your week is that?
Like the majority.
And for people that aren't in your portfolio.
I don't think anything's for free. Like, I don't know, it's funny. One thing that my dad taught me when I was younger was he always used to say, nothing in life is for free. And I don't think that's free. And I think what's free and what probably should be free and what we should probably think about more is, I think the more you give, the more of kind of a life of servitude that you live, it will come back, like it will. And it may come back in the most peculiar of ways. I mean, when we met in that cafe, Jeanette, like, that was the beginning of a friendship that I would never have expected. Like, I think I walked away going, that woman's a bit crazy. But I love it and I want to be in that orbit, and they're the kinds of people I want to surround myself with. And so I think, nothing in life's free, and the more you give, it actually just makes you feel so much better, especially if you're feeling like you're not getting anywhere, which is me, like every day. I'm like, why am I doing this event? Why am I doing all these things? But yeah, I love it, and it will come back.
I think that's a really nice way to put it, because it is very much about this pay it forward mindset, which I've found in this ecosystem, and I think a lot of you in this room would be those people. I've seen your work, a lot of you, organising things, tirelessly working behind the scenes, doing things that people don't notice, and it does pay forward. And sometimes all it needs is just that one introduction or that one moment.
Yeah, because then 6 years later we're investing in Jeanette, and she's incredible, and a person that is, not only just building an incredible business that is really, we need more people like you to really disrupt the education system in this country and the world. So that's how it comes back.
This is the only reason I'm doing this panel, so I can hang out with my friends and just get complimented the entire time. Thank you, Samar. That's really kind of you. Now, we said sometimes it just takes one moment. And Gordon, a story I tell on stage quite regularly is that I used to have a boss who was Scottish, who at some point I convinced him to let me take what I now refer to as startup parental leave so I could birth the business. And Gordon generously negotiated with me 2.5 months of leave. And at the end of I took all of my unpaid leave, all of my annual leave, everything. And he called, he's like, are you coming back? And so Gordon, can you tell that story from your perspective when I come to you and you've got projects to deliver? Like how did you approach it? What's your perspective on it?
So working back in time, I think over the last few months, I've had 4 or 5 people, including people in my team, come up to me and say, hey, I was at this conference and this lady mentioned this Scottish guy at ANZ. And I thought to myself, hey, my boss is a Scottish guy at ANZ. Is that you? And I've had friends do that to me and team members do that to me. So look, so that's always interesting. From my perspective, I kind of see it a little bit differently, I think. So first of all, ANZ is just a very supportive organization. I've seen it support team members with cancer and support them to a kind of healthy recovery and back to work. I've seen it support me take part-time work to raise children. I've 6 months off to travel the world when I'd started a new job. So it's a very supportive environment. I think at that point in time, you only really ever asked for something that was allowed within a formal policy. Like there was I wasn't, waiting outside doors asking for exemptions to do sneaky things. It was a formal policy, and that formal policy supports flexible working in whatever form flexible working takes, whether it's to as I've said before, start a family, compete at the Olympics, play for the Matildas. That's a role that's a policy that's there for a reason. So I think what is perhaps less common is people that think, oh, how awesome, and help it along, versus people who think, oh, bugger, this member's going to be less present and less involved and eventually leave. As I said, I've been very lucky to work with very good human beings around me in ANZ, and I've always had that support extended to me by good human beings. I think it's an important thing to do when you're looking for any role or embarking on any endeavor, is to look at the quality of the people around you. And at that time when you mentioned it, it was, this is a formal policy. You can apply for it, and hell, I'll help as much as I can. And as I say, I think you mentioned pay it back, and I've had it paid back to me, and I hope to pay it out to other people in the future as well, because it's part of the circle.
I'm still going to call it startup parental leave, though. You know that, right?
I think it was the when you came back and worked a day a week. For,
2 days a week.
2 days a week. 2 days a week. That was harder. I'm thinking, what can I get someone to do 2 days a week that is of value? But one of the things
we found some things.
You've got so many talents, Jeanette, and so many skills. I think that was why you were brought into the organization in the first place. It was very easy to find that. So yeah.
So that's also a call out to action for anyone who's worried about asking their boss for flexibility. There are policies. There are people out there who will support you. There are part-time returns to work. And I think really seeing it as a pursuit that is just part of becoming a richer human being and a richer employee at the time is probably a great lens for managers and leaders to look through. So thank you for that. Yes, I like my story, and I'm sticking to it. It makes it sound much more cool if it was sounds like it was a struggle, but
Okay. Noted.
No.
We know who the storyteller is here.
Everything in my investment decks is true. Samar, can I talk to you a little bit about, where was my question? So raising capital, right? It's one of the biggest blockers for early stage founders. Your support did help me raise my first round from, bouncing the deck off you, or like letting you be one of the first people to know that I was actually raising. What kind of, what things do you practically do for new founders that others could maybe learn from?
We spend a lot of time educating founders on terminology, because so guilty, including myself, of, I just went from one corporate jargon organisation to another, and I think particularly when it comes to finance, it's a barrier to entry because there's a great deal of I don't know if you guys have heard of Cody Simpson. She's out of the US. She does a lot of education on like general finance terms. And that's kind of what we like to think of ourselves as, is just breaking down that barrier in terms of terminology. So that's kind of the really basic start, but we also have a range of education programs that specifically focus on actually also unpacking the Australian and New Zealand ecosystem and the plethora of capital that is available to entrepreneurs that isn't just about raising capital. And I think I remember you saying this once, Jeanette. We roped you into some other talk that I always get you to do, and it was at Deloitte. And there's such a celebration for raising capital, globally as a kind of beacon of success. But actually, taking your team through the pandemic and keeping everyone's job and growing your business despite not having raised capital is something that I think also needs to be celebrated more. And I think we try to create that kind of education platform to just really give access and visibility into the types of, taking leave from your job or that's like the kind of baseline. But for us, it's like there's so many grants out there. There's all these government institutions, universities, like we work with everyone we possibly can and find out as much as we possibly can about the opportunities that are available and just breaking that down.
Yeah, I really like that in terms of it's a community focused piece. And Nock, when you're running events and you have these hundreds of thousands of people around you, what are some of the most common things they're actually looking for? Like, do you see commonalities in the confusion or the questions or what people want?
Yeah, it's pretty straightforward. Knowledge, obviously, they want to learn something. Networking, connecting, and to be inspired. And they usually get all those three when they come to these events.
And when you were in your own entrepreneurial journey or are in your entrepreneurial journey, what are some of the perhaps unsung people in your world that have helped you lift the bar and expand your businesses?
I mean, from a supportive point of view, sometimes it's just your really good, friends and family just being there to sort of lift you up when you need them to. And then, just, I guess, the community that I've built, the networks, you always will have a certain few people that you always can rely on. And, some mentors as well. I think they're always really important.
Nock is one of those people that if you text her a question or like, do you know someone if, she will come back with like 16 different links in a minute and have something lined up.
You just asked me the other day about restaurants and I gave you 10 restaurants.
Thank you for that. Now, we've got some time, but does anyone have questions from the floor? Like, does anyone have a conversation about any of the things that you're seeing in your environments or communities or the ecosystems here in Melbourne or even the ones in other cities and countries? Like, I'm super curious to hear a little bit about that. So what do we have? I was just thinking of this whole kind of thing. Is that luck in the conversation between you?
Kia ora, I'm Jenny Rudd from Aotearoa, New Zealand. I was really enjoying that conversation between you all. It's really clear you've all got lots of connections together. So one of the things that we do in my angel group, I'm on the board of Enterprise Angels in New Zealand, is we have something called an angel drop-in clinic where we get some of the angels to just come and hang out like sort of once a month, and people who are whatever stage they're at, they can just come and say, talking to your point about jargon, come and sit down for half an hour and go, what's this? People have asked me for these things. What do they mean? Am I ready for capital? And angels just sit around and give help. So probably, Samar, it'd be quite interesting to hear your view of of your angel group, of all your angel investors that under scale, what kind of things that they do that is not is sort of unsung that they do to help your founders that they've invested in?
Yeah, good question. A lot of them do a lot of free work, and so they come in and there's probably kind of three key areas that we mostly help our founders, irrespective if we invest in them or not. And so firstly, it's connecting to customers, particularly corporate customers, because a lot of us have backgrounds and connections into the corporate Australia in particular. And the best way to raise capital, if that's your journey, is to get customers and to start making revenue. The second thing that we do is advisory so take an advisory role or a board seat on these startups that we work with. But we link to then talent. So we actually go in and do a lot of workshops. So you need your, what is your go-to-market? How are you actually going to get your product into the hands of, Jeanette opened today with, it doesn't matter how good you are as an entrepreneur or how good your product is. I mean, the best technology does not win. I think there are countless of examples of that globally. Apple is not the best phone. It just isn't, but they have the best way to attract people to buy their product and pay a premium for it. And I think that's kind of the things that we do is we go in and help founders find their clients and build their strategies to get into market and to expand globally. And there's a lot of people within the ecosystem, and there's so many I can see around the room today, including yourself, Jenny, and Beck and Eamon and all these people that just spend so much time together where we're like, okay, how do we help the network and how do we help founders find their pathway and clear it for them?
Awesome. Thank you so much for the question and also for sharing what you do in your network. What's it called again?
Enterprise Angels.
Enterprise Angels, okay. Oh, thank you, Bronwyn. Any other comments, questions? Unsung, can we give a round of applause for Bronwyn at Launchvic, please? I haven't done anything yet. Bronwyn is always behind the scenes organising all the Launchvic events, so thank you, Bronwyn. What other questions and conversations do we have? Any examples from your cities, ecosystems, your personal founder journeys of people that have helped you out? Let's celebrate them. Let's celebrate the unsung heroes. Thanks, Eamon.
Hi, Jeanette. Hi, everyone. Thank you for the amazing insight that you shared with us. I'm not going to ask a question. I'm going to make a follow-up comment on building an ecosystem, the events that we organize for the exposure. I believe that we need more event organizers and community builders that comes from the grassroots in order to increase the number of species in an ecosystem. As we mature for the original people who organize events, the community itself become a little bit more exclusive. So we always need more people making those events to increase the number of participants and increase the engagement within the ecosystem, and then they will flow into what species they are connected to. So thank you for all the events that you organize. Whoever want to build a community, do that, increase the pipeline into the ecosystem, and we look forward to work with all of you. So thank you.
Thank you so much, Eamon from Hatch Quarter. I absolutely love that. We got a comment here. Yeah, or question?
Hello. Good morning. I am not from Australia, but I would like to thank you because I learned a lot. I am community builder in my country, and that thing that you say, Samar, about teaching our founders to talk, to speak the right language in finance is something we never thought about. And thank you very much to give us that particular advice. And thank you for having us, all of us, all of those countries here in Australia and teaching us something else about your community building. Thanks.
Thank you so much. That's a beautiful comment. I do want to also address, in general about community building. I completely agree that the jargon is major. I love the comment from Eamon around the species and just encouraging different kinds of people, because otherwise you do get to a conference and you look around and people all look the same, which is not the case in GEC, which is amazing. But something I'm quite proud of is the fact that there's groups of like international students that come to Australia. So a group called Stint, they've got 6,000 international students on a Slack platform, and they run events weekly to make sure that international students feel welcome and the door is left open to all of them as they join our community. So things like that are pretty important. What other comments and questions, and also panel, if you wanted to respond to anything spoken? Not yet? No? Hey, Beck.
Hi everyone, I'm Beck from LaunchVic, manage the Alice Anderson Fund there and work closely with particularly Samara and Jeanette on the panel, and know the unsung hero-ness of both of them. I'm curious, you know, you all do so much for so many people, but there are only so many hours in the day and only so many that we can, you know, that you can help as an individual. So what tips do you have to encourage others to step up and be the community builders, the examples that you're setting? But, you know, what tips have you got to encourage others to follow that journey?
Nock, I think we might start with you.
I mean, just knowing what sort of community you want to be part of, I guess, from scratch, just reaching out to those communities, whether you want to volunteer or help out. I think that's always a great start. Time-wise, I don't know. I can't really, answer that too much. I feel like I have ADHD, so I'm like everywhere. I manage to do so many things. I try to stick to a schedule. It's very hard, and can I dare say, I love ChatGPT. It's helped me so much in handling a lot of my projects. But yeah, I don't know. It's just what's priority, right? And then you set your time.
I like that about thinking about what kind of community do you want to be a part of, and I would add to that, think about what kind of community you want to build. For me, I always like to think about the future and say, well, when I look back, like when I look forward, can I see a world that I wanted to create, and what can I help to do to create that? So that's how I often think about my community building, which is what topics are we talking about? What procurement are we choosing? Who am I putting on stage in front of you? Whose voices are being elevated? I think all of that stuff is important. But honestly, yeah, just volunteer as a starting point. And Samar, what would you add?
Yeah, maybe think about the skill. Everyone has a skill. Like everyone has something that they're good at. And I think if you try to harness that and then bring that to a community, no one's going to say no, because there's a massive shortage of every skill. And there's never enough people to provide, connections or access to. And I think, yeah, pick something you're good at. It's usually a good place to start.
I often say you don't have to be a chef to work in a restaurant. So you don't have to be an entrepreneur to be in the entrepreneurial community. There's many different roles. And I'm just curious as well. I'm going to take this in a slightly different direction now. Gordon, you've got the mic, so that's that's on you. You are one of those people that, I'm just going to, inverted commas, hold the purse strings of the Australian economy, right? At a big bank, you've got procurement budgets, you can make choices about contractors and employment. How do or could large companies or people in these roles think about their engagement from actually a customer or procurement perspective with startups?
Yeah, look, that's a really interesting question. I probably, in the role I am, I'm a little bit more disconnected to the network than yourself and the others on the panel. I think maybe the traditional way that large organizations have interacted with the ecosystem is through acquisition of knowledge, skills, technology. Certainly in, consulting industries, there's a well-beaten path of small consulting firms, whether it's in design or project management or whatever it might be, being acquired by large firms, rolled into practices and knowledge retained and used to grow the firm. I think most large corporates aren't as good at that. Certainly, I think of the one I'm in, it's not quite as good at that as that. But I think it's a really important part of the way large organizations connect with smaller organizations. Certainly, we're very familiar that we don't have all the answers, we don't have all the skills, we don't have all the people that can solve all the problems. And we're also aware that it's very hard for us to bridge some of those gaps. And I think a way that large organizations can do that is through partnering initially and then acquisition. And that's kind of, exit strategies for small firms who might have a, differentiated proposition that can fit into the kind of jigsaw puzzle of a larger organization. I think that's an important role that large organizations can play, and also that entrepreneurs can think about from an exit strategy perspective in maybe 3-5 years' time when their organizations mature.
I remember ANZ Innovation acquired a company called Shout for Good at the time we were working together, which was a charity app where you could shout someone a coffee for charity or something. I wanted to, following on from this point, I have the privilege of having worked in this kind of role. There are a lot of people I speak to that are just like, how on earth do I knock on the door of ANZ or like a big company? How would you suggest that they start to build those connections, or like where do they go first? Is there a front door? Do they just walk to reception? Like what do they have to do?
Yeah.
Specifically, to get to you, how would someone get to you to pitch you a startup?
I mean, contacts are the best of the tram this morning. I got an email from a colleague suggesting someone they know might be worth going for a job. And that's probably the most direct way that you can connect with someone. I might kind of answer it a little bit differently. I think the connections are important. They get in the door, but I think getting in the door is but one stage in that kind of process. What startups do is give people exposure to an environment where they can get stuff done. And I think when recruiting, it's probably the most important factor when trying to hire somebody is do they have the ability to get stuff done, as opposed to the ability to sit in meetings and produce PowerPoint and pontificate and whatnot. And I think startups, whilst it's not necessarily directly, it's not causation, there is a strong correlation. If you have started a startup, you have to be able to get stuff done. And that particular skill set is always going to be helpful in an environment where you're building things, whether it's technology or products or services. So I think one of the things organizations can do is certainly look at people with that experience and try and think about it, not from the lens of, well, they work for a small firm, not a big firm, and therefore are less attractive, but look at the two people and go, well, this person gets stuff done because they had to produce or create something on their own. Think of what you did with Hex, versus somebody that didn't and just survived inside a large organization through some of the skills before. So I think that's a really important thing for large companies to look for in hiring people. And I think it's a really important skill for people who have started startups who want to join large corporates.
Okay, so a little bit of recognising the innate things that we do as entrepreneurs when knocking on that door. I feel a few people in the room were attacked when you said you just sit in a room in meetings and make PowerPoint decks. Was that an emotional damage moment for a few of us? I think it was emotional damage.
I've been that person, sorry, so that's why I say it.
I will always remember an executive, someone standing up and saying, if I plucked you out of your role and dropped you into a startup, could you do anything? And I'm like, I don't know. Now you do. Now I could. Now we're here at the Global Entrepreneurship Congress. It's not just about Melbourne. It's not just about Hex. We actually, for those who aren't familiar, we run study abroad programs in Singapore. We used to go to Silicon Valley, Tel Aviv. We're about to go to Austin when the borders slammed shut. But we bring international kids to Australia as well. And we are very big on fostering these soft diplomacy ties across particularly Asia-Pac, but also around the world. And Nock, particularly for your connection with Asian Hustle Network and its origins in San Francisco and its connection to this region, how do you sort of see your role in as a global connector? So like building these ties across cities and ecosystems. She's so humble. She's so unsung.
I mean, just how I'm connecting with people like physically here, I see the same thing as doing it online. And like I'm always reaching out to people, seeing they need help. It doesn't matter if you're in another country, another continent, or just next door. I feel like we can easily just help one another. So, I've just connected with a lot of people globally, whether they need help in something or they need me to support in something or just help them shout out something. That's what I just do. I'm not too strategic about it, to be honest.
Which is kind of beautiful because it means you're just being an authentic human and like building those connections regardless of where they are. You're not thinking about it like, oh my gosh, I'm going to do market entry to a new country. You're like, I'm just chatting to a cool person about things that they need. Yeah. And there are entire government departments dedicated to fostering these soft diplomacy ties. So Nock's just in her bedroom doing it.
And I just leave that to the founders to do all the hard work. I'll just do all the fun stuff. But I just believe there's just enough sun for everyone. So yeah, that's where I come from.
That's beautiful. Enough sun for everyone. Samar, do you have any thoughts around global connectivity and connecting Melbourne to the world?
We're always trying to find people that are doing similar things to us. So actually this morning we saw, I don't know if you guys have heard of Stellar Foundation, but we've started this Gender Allies group, which you mentioned earlier, in terms of getting VCs, angel investors, ecosystem partners like accelerators, everyone to start reporting on their gender statistics. And really is to I mean, what you don't report, what you don't see, you don't measure. And you made that point really saliently before. And Stellar is doing the same thing in the US. So we're actually just going to reach out to them. There's so many other networks that do very similar things to us, and we're always just reaching out. And likewise, people around the globe are reaching out to us. So we'll always take a call and have a chat about what they're doing.
I think that's that combined with Nock's comment before about there's enough sun for everyone, I think is just so beautiful that we can make these connections. People have got similar goals despite cultural differences or location differences. Innovators and entrepreneurs and the people that surround them, I think, are all future makers, right? That's why we're here. So I think this has been a very wholesome and fulfilling for me personally panel. Hopefully you all enjoyed getting to know these three incredible humans and hearing a little bit about their work, and even just seeing within them the true leadership that they have and the passion they have for supporting others, regardless of whether it's for a Civil War reenactment or for starting a startup. So final comment from all three of you. If you can think of one tip you would give to an ecosystem builder about how to amplify their impact, what would you tell them? Who wants to start?
Look at me.
Nock doesn't like unprepared questions.
I do not like them. I think I'll go from a sort of networking connections point of view. I don't think networking should be transactional. It should be a genuine connection. I think that's the most important. People can just definitely tell if you're in it just for yourself. To be quite genuine and authentic about it. And you just want to, you should be out there helping people, offering your help instead of going, what can you do for me?
Okay, so authentic connections and offer help first.
Yes.
All right, love it. Samar, what tip do you have?
I mean, I think maybe even before that, if you're not sure where to start but you really want to get involved, just say yes to every single opportunity. So back to you got to kiss a lot of frogs. Just literally say yes to everything. I think that's how I got to this position, really. From my corporate world to here, I literally said yes to every single opportunity. But I also did my job really well, and taught someone my job so that they could do it. So then that created capacity for me to do more things. And I'm probably a bit like Nock. I'm a bit ADHD. I like to do lots of different things. And I think, if you want to be a really good boundary person, which I'm not, maybe set some time aside to kind of dedicate to learning that skill and saying yes to that thing and being really good at it.
Can I go on from that? I feel I used to be like that too, right? You get to a point where you say, yes, you should say yes to every opportunity until you realise what you should say no to. Yeah, because then you just get so burnt out. Yeah, you learn to build your boundaries.
Towards your focus point.
Yeah.
Now, Gordon, you said before that you don't necessarily see yourself as being in the ecosystem, but guess what? You're here and we dragged you in it. So I'm really sorry about that. What comments or thoughts do you have for people in building up their role as an ecosystem contributor?
Look, I think it's much like being a parent. You just have to be relentlessly encouraging. People are on their own path and they're going to follow that path. Trying to deviate them onto another path isn't going to help. So just encourage as much as you can and help them, follow the path that they want to follow the path they want to follow. I'd also say to other people, do things early. Don't procrastinate. You never get more likely to take that leap as you get more into debt and have more family ties and have more responsibilities in life. So the earlier you do it, the better. Don't procrastinate. Get going. And for people in the system, encourage.
Okay, so endless support and just get moving. Just do the thing. Yes, I think I like that whole if you can walk through the door, walk through the door. And my final thought is just that I'm incredibly lucky as a founder to be surrounded not just by these people, but also those of you in the room, all of the people at this conference and in this city and around the world who have been part of the HEX journey. It's been a privilege so far, and I often feel like we just have gotten started and I've barely done anything. And that's a real true feeling that I have as a founder, and I feel like some of you might relate to that. No matter how hard you work, for how long, you just haven't done anything that you want to do yet. I know Melanie Perkins feels like that too, so I feel like we're not alone. And honestly, I think it's amazing to see all of you here. So thank you for choosing to spend your time with us this morning. It's lovely to meet you all. Please do connect. And thank you so much to my panel.
Thank you.